Hi, everyone. It's Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. This week's Rutgers Rant is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. A big thank you to our sponsor and to all of our listeners for the continued support. Now let's get to the show.
From NJ.com and the Star Ledger, welcome to the Rutgers Rant, your one-stop podcast for the Scarlet Knights. With your host, Steve Politi, and Rutgers insiders Keith Sargent and James Cratch. Let's start shopping.
Hello, everybody. Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. Welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. I've got Sergeant Cratch here as always. Guys, it was just great to see you. I mean, we were out of football practice together, watching football, no masks. It just felt normal. It was nice, you know? I mean, we're getting crap from Fooch. It was like old time. Yep. Carlin showed up. It was like, I felt like I was at my high school reunion 10 years ago, right?
Even the fans got into the act because, you know, you posted the photo of us at practice, you know, to our text subscribers. And the first thing that they wanted to know wasn't about the quarterback competition or injuries or any of the other happenings at camp. They wanted to know why Steve Politi did not have a beard.
Right. You know? Yes. I mean, I wouldn't dare now, even if I could, and I can't grow a mustache here. Even if I could, I wouldn't try to do it because of Cratch's beard is like, you know, Grizzly Man, Montana level, you know. It looks like, I mean, really, if you have a cabin somewhere in the woods where you're writing a manifesto of some kind, Cratch, let us know now, because I don't want to find out years from now that you've been working on a project here, you know, that you're going to go off the grid.
Wow,
the beard?
I grow the first beard of my life, and you immediately cut to the Unabomber joke.
Well, I mean, Sarge, am I wrong? Am I off base here?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. In some ways, I almost want them to institute the mask policy. That way we don't have to look at it every day. But
right, yeah.
The other thing, it was the bucket hat, the lack of the bucket hat.
Yeah, I didn't have one.
Doesn't have on, where Cratch and I are, you know, we are conforming to NJAM, you know, NJ Advanced Media uniform policy, which is a bucket hat, and you just are your own, you know, you're a rebel.
I didn't have. I got a nice comment on Facebook on Twitter about my calves, which is it's just funny because Greg Schiano complimented my calves after practice, which I was, you know, so if a football coach, a guy who's paid to make observations about people in their physical prime, looks at my massive muscular calves and has nice things to say. I think that's a sign that you know, comeback might be on the trail here. What do you think?
We're off to a great start. We're off to a great start on this.
We really are. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, Rutgers football. You want to talk a little bit about that? I got to tell you, and I want each one of you guys, because just give me if someone came up to you and said, "How's camp going?" or "How's the team look?" I'm just curious what your answer would be. Like, give me the view from 30,000 feet, Cratch. What is your general thought on what's going on down there?
So this might disappoint some folks, but they look exactly how I thought they were going to look. Physically, they look a lot bigger. I think there's a lot more talent in the program. There's a lot more depth. But that being said, nothing I've seen, we're about 2 weeks in, has made me move off my idea of, hey, this is a much better football team, but it's still not a bowl team. That's where I'm kind of at this point. I think I went into camp thinking this was a 4 or 5 win team. They look to me like a 4 or 5 win team. Lots of optimism. They're getting much better. They're on the right path. I just don't think this year is going to be the breakthrough year.
Sarge, what would be your answer to that question?
Well, the depth is ridiculous because, for one, you know, because they're allowed to go over the 105 limit because of, you know, the super seniors don't count. So they have like 120 guys, and two, you know, just the depth in general. Like, I mean, just amount of, you know, guys they have returning. I've written it before, but all 11 starters, you know, are back. 9 of 11 defensive starters. That, you know, so it's just on and on and on. The two deep is just, you know, has more experience than Greg Schiano ever has had. The one thing I always couch it at two things. One, you know, how much markedly can these players get better from they were 3-6 team a year ago, and two, you know, every other Big Ten school, you know, presumably has a lot of guys back because this was a year where they gave everyone a year back. But they do have more named guys than they ever had before. I'm writing about it this week. You know, the amount of 6-year seniors. Greg Schiano in his first tenure had 3 6-year seniors. Brian Duffy in 2004, Mason Robinson in 2012, Edmund Larray in 2011. They have 9 this year, including 6 who have stuck it out through their entire Rutgers career. They were part of the 2016 recruiting class. That is unbelievable to me that they have so many 6-year seniors, grown men, as Greg Schiano likes to call it. Those are 2 things that stand out to me: the depth and just a number of guys that have back who have starting experience.
All right, I'm going to go one football observation, one non-football observation. The thing that struck me, and I stood next to Schiano as the players were walking off the practice field. And I just saw a lot of smiles. This could be you're in the middle of the dog days now. Practice number 6 is the one I saw. I think, they're getting to realize they're in the heat, the heaviness now. It was a tough practice. Schiano was on them throughout the entire thing, and you got the sense that a lot of what was going on last year with COVID and the pressure and the uncertainty has been washed away, and they're just a football team now. And I think that shows. I think it shows with Schiano. I think he looks a lot more relaxed. And I guys got that sense that that's a very good thing, that they're enthusiastic, team spirit, all that culture stuff we hear about. That's number 1. Number 2 for me is just watching 7-on-7s and watching them go through passing drills. I was just struck by just the amount of talent at the wide receiver now. And I bring this up specifically in this position because we spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about it being a position of weakness. They're going through now. I mean, you got like a grown man. You talk about that, Bo Melton. You got Shameen Jones is coming back. Then the 2s come through. You got Cruikshank. You got Washington, who looks like is a breakthrough season. But even after that, the depth beyond that, there's just all of a sudden a lot of guys in skill positions in this program. Cratch, I think that is a really good sign of what you're talking about when you guys talk about just in building the depth and building the roster.
No doubt. I mean, I think we look. I mean, it feels so long ago, but even go back to 2019, they had, I think, 17, 18 scholarship wide receivers, guys in the wide receiver room, and you looked at the roster preseason, and you're like, maybe one of these guys will produce.
Yeah.
Whereas now they've got about the same number, but it's Shameen, it's Bo Melton, it's Isaiah Washington coming on, it's Aaron Cruikshank. If Josh Youngblood eventually works his way, it's all these options that they have. So I think that does speak a lot. I am continually amazed by the overhaul that has happened in the wide receiver room between Taekwon Underwood coming in. I mean, it's very obvious that room had just no coaching basically in the Chris Ash era. He's come in, done a tremendous job. And I don't think we give him enough credit for it, even though he gets a lot of credit for it. Because he's a guy who's very young in his career. I mean, credit to Greg Schiano for bringing him in and realizing the ability he had to kind of overhaul that room. And the guys like Melton and Jones, they've just tapped into talent that everyone thought they had, but they had just never kind of made good on when they were here. For me, my football observation, I think the offensive line is going to be a revolving door, and they are going to leave no stone unturned trying to find the best 5 guys that can protect Noah Vedral and give them a shot in Big Ten games. I think whatever the starting offensive line is against Temple, I would expect it's going to change several different ways, and I think they're okay with that. They're okay with rotating guys in and out, moving guys from guard to tackle, and vice versa. I think they're going to do a lot of that. My non-football observation is it's just a total night, it's a real college football program, the way it's run, and they've got enough staff members out there and medical and trainers and managers and the coaches. It's just such an efficient operation. There is no energy wasted in a Greg Schiano practice. It just looks like a finely tuned machine, which is something we didn't see much in the prior regime.
Sorry, Charles, you've been doing some great practice reports. Give me a position. I like where this conversation went. I talked about the receivers, and what struck me about receivers is when you look at, I had the roster, and you're watching these guys out there, and you're like, who is that? There are a lot of moments you're like, wow, that kid's a freshman. Has there been a position that sticks out for you?
Yeah, I mean, linebackers we knew was going to be deep. They have some. That's probably the position where they had the most starting experience, right? I mean, even a guy like Rashawn Battle started, and Drew Singleton, and obviously Tyshawn Fogg, Tyreek Maddox Williams, is a 6-year senior. He's played in 45 games in his career. He probably won't start unless they go with a 4 linebacker group on in games. So they have so much depth at that position. And and again, you talk about, where they were, early in the Chris Ash era, and Chris Ash does get some credit for the way he recruited linebackers. That was, probably the position that he probably had the best, ability to evaluate talent at. Linebacker, as a playmaking, is really the key to Greg Schiano's defense and Rob Smith's defense. So, to me, I think, 03 is going to be is poised for a big year. Tyson 5 is going to be really good. They just have a lot of talent, in the middle of the defense.
03 just looks like a monster. I mean, he had his shirt off at the end of practice. You're like, holy cow, look at the size of it. I mean, he is an NFL body. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah.
Look, Rutgers fans, you want some inside aspect of this. 03 has become such a more vocal leader. And I talked to him about it in Indianapolis at Big Ten Media Day. And he did say that, it took him a long time, and Greg Schiano was able to kind of coax it out of him. It wasn't something that came naturally to him, but you see him out there, you could tell he's going to be a leader. I'd be stunned if he's not one of the captains, once again this year.
All right. We got this far without talking about quarterbacks. Watched a lot of them. I mean, Noah Vedril's clear number one. For once, we don't have to debate who's going to be the starter. Kratch, what are your thoughts on watching that position so far through camp?
I think the scrimmages are going to be big for that thing. I mean, look, right. I think it's very clear that Snyder and Simon are the two guys. I mean, Schiano said in Indianapolis, I think what we've seen in practice so far is backed it up. Johnny Langan is a quarterback, but if something were to happen to Noah, they're not going to ride Langan for the rest of the game. They're not going to ride Langan the next week. They're going to go with either Simon or Snyder. I think it's Greg Schiano has really kind of said it's too close to call. I kind of lean that way. I think from what we've seen, the reps have been pretty divvied up accordingly in terms of second team, third team. I think that Snyder obviously has more experience. I think Simon coming in, at least, I know that the Ash staff kind of considered Simon to be a better prospect than Snyder when they got him. So, because obviously Simon was initially committed to Ash. So I would say that if I had to pick someone right now, I would think I would lean towards Simon maybe a little bit, but I think it's pretty even. And I think that either way, whoever wins the job, no one really knows what you're going to get until, and Rutgers hopes it doesn't happen, they have to go out there and play.
Yeah. And Vedril Sarge, I mean, watching him so far, I mean, I think we expect him to have a clear, better understanding, quote unquote, of the Gleason offense. I think he already had a pretty good feel for it. He looks healthy. What do you see from him?
Yes, the feel for it, you could see it just from practice. I mean, he just has so much more of a command. I talked about the leadership. You can see how guys rally around him. We've talked about this before. He was he was as accurate as a Rutgers quarterback has been since 2004. Ryan Hart was the last quarterback to be at 65%. And that's going to be a key to Sean Gleason's offense. The other thing is, just his ability to be able to keep plays alive. I mean, people look at, his stature. I think we kind of talked about it. I thought he looked bigger physically, but that was your first up close, and I think you said it to me, like he looks small just from a height standpoint.
From a height standpoint, he does. Yes, but
I don't think
body wise, I agree with you. Yeah.
I don't think that matters, because I think he's has the ability, the uncanny ability to be able to keep plays alive, and I think that's going to be a big key to the season, especially with the question marks at offensive line.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll get to it later in the segment. There's been a lot of questions about what happens to Noah Vedril if he gets hurt, and what happens to the team if Noah Vedril gets hurt. And I totally agree that is one of the 5 biggest questions I have about the team as well. Where do they go if that happens, and how big of a drop-off is this going to be? All right. So you want to dive into some true or false, guys? You're ready for a little true or false action? All right. Let's do this. You know the rules, of course. All right. True or false? The biggest position of concern, defensive line. Kratch, true or false?
False.
Sarge, true or false?
False.
All right. The biggest position of concern, offensive line. Kratch, true or false?
True.
Sarge, true or false?
I hate when we agree, but yeah, it's true.
All right, I guess I don't have to go any further than that. Interesting that you say that, because we'll talk about it, but the rotation of the defensive line is very interesting to me. All right, true or false? The position that's going to surprise people the most, tight end. Kratch, true or false?
True.
Okay. Sarge?
The position that... Yeah, true.
Yeah, you just said you don't like it when you agree.
Know. I'm trying to disagree. I'm trying to think of another position, but
the next one I was going to do was there's going to be cornerback. I guess that was one I thought that could be a lot better. People thought. I don't know. We'll see. All right, true or false? This is the best coaching staff in Rutgers football history. Kratz, true or false?
True.
Sarge?
True. And I don't want to break the rule, but let's get back to that one after we're done.
True or false? This is going to be the best basketball team that Steve Pikiell has. And that's a quote has had since he's been at Rutgers. And that's a quote from Steve Pikiell directly through Jerry Carino. True or false, Kratch?
I'm going to say false.
Sarge, true or false?
I'm going to say true, and I'm going to rip Joe Lenardi, who has Rutgers, in his way too early NCAA bracket today as one of the last 4 teams in the field, along with Seton Hall.
Oh boy,
that is crazy to me, considering not only did they get in, at what, a 10 seed last year, but they won a game, and they had the amount. Last 4 in, Joe Lenardi. Woo.
Yeah, it's a little early for that, to be honest with you. All right, finally, true or false? We were wrong. Greg Brown and Pat Hobbs totally aced that coaching search. Kratch, true or false?
I'm going to say a polite false.
Sarge, you want to field that one?
It was, it was smooth. It was a smooth.
All right, so this is where we're coming from this, guys. I don't know if you listen, if anyone out there listens to all the other podcasts, which I recognize is difficult now that there are 37 Rutgers podcasts, but the one with John Newman and Danny Breeslayer, what's his name?
Breslauer.
Are you sure it's not Breeslayer? Are you sure it's not Breeslayer? I think it's Breeslayer. Anyway.
You've known Danny for 40 years.
John and Danny, in their podcast, had Greg Brown on, and it was an interesting segment, and Sarge wanted me to listen to it because he halfway through, he takes a shot at us. He says that there was a lot of misinformation in the media, which I don't mind. I don't mind people do that. It's fine. Generally speaking, I find that if we get something wrong, people tell us exactly what it is right away. They don't give you you got something wrong. Well, what is it? Well, you just got something wrong. But that's fine. But the thing that amazed me in this was just, the best way I can describe it was trying to revise what happened during that process, and in which, I think we all know it wasn't like it was happening behind closed doors. The thing blew up. They had to get dragged back to the table. And the quote that just blew me away from Greg Brown was that, all we had to do to get him was keep our eyes on the prize. Kratch? I'm going to throw it to you.
Can I take it?
Sarge, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Sarge.
Please. Go ahead, take it.
So a couple things about that. One, it wasn't us who broke the news that Schiano had pulled out on that Sunday. That was Pete Thamel, and then obviously we confirmed it quickly thereafter. It wasn't us who reported that he had pulled out on that Sunday, obviously 6 days before. Two, Pat Hobbs was interviewing people, after that. So, and that's just a fact. That was, that has come out in depositions from other coaches.
Jeff Hafley, Brett Belima.
That is just a fact that, that the whole thing blew up and that it wasn't smooth. It wasn't a smooth thing. So, a little bit but that's fine.
I don't mind it. Just come out and say it. Look, it was a rocky search.
Ultimately, they nailed it. They got it done.
Yes, that's why it amazes me that we're trying to now sand over the rough edges on what happened. Kratch,
I will see. Yeah, actually, and Sarge is right. Pete had it first, but I was looking back because every once in a while, I gotta admit, something like this happens, the juices start flowing, and I kind of look back. I go dig into the archives, what was going on? It's I think that Sunday, I think it was after the Michigan State game. I think we had written a story we reported that morning the Plan B talk was already beginning. That was we didn't come up with Jed Fish off the top of our head. Let's throw this guy out there.
Right. Plan B was Plan A for them at the start. Let's be clear on that. Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, I think Plan A was like that guy from Toledo, who everyone talks about. But anyway, no. So
Plan A was Butch Jones. Butch Jones.
Jones.
Yeah,
right. Butch Jones.
Yes, right.
We got that one.
And Greg Schiano was Plan A.
He was Plan A. He was Plan A.
Yeah,
no, I mean, look, I think that like when they do the 30 for 30. I just hope they call us.
God.
That's all.
Oh, that would be all the they'd just be out of 30 for 30s if that's one. But I would watch it. That's for sure. Yeah. All right. We couldn't let that go, obviously. But all right, let's go to the next thing we want to talk about. You had something to say about the best coaching staff.
Oh, well, sorry, Ted. So I think you would ask. I was just going to say about the best Rutgers team Pikel's had.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe, but like, what happens when they're 5 minutes into the game and Big Cliff's got 2 fouls already? That's continually my issue with this team.
That's a big loss. I mean, I think you're also right about having the issues in the backcourt somewhat. I mean, Jacob Young was an extremely important player. It's hard to, until I see that team replace Miles Johnson and Jacob Young, I can't make that statement about the best basketball team that Steve Pikel's had. Sarge, what do you got?
So the coaching staff, okay,
yes, right.
And I think one of the big things that I think Kratch touched on a little bit earlier, but yeah, I think is the best thing that Greg Schiano did this offseason was keeping that entire coaching staff basically intact. And we talked about the wide receivers, and here's why they struggled all those years, but they had 5 wide receiver coaches in as many years. I mean, year after year after year. I talked to Bo Melton in Indianapolis about it. How difficult it was to learn different techniques and different things and not have the stability at these different position groups. Everyone talks about, we've written ad nauseum about the revolving door of offensive coordinators, but it stemmed so much deeper than that. Like just the inability of Kyle Flood late, and then certainly Chris Ash of keep retaining assistant coaches. And now the fact that Greg Schiano has been able to do it. Now, look, I mean, it's come at a cost. I mean, Sean Gleason got a sizable raise, and that's based on results. But he's going to need to do this going forward, and he did it during his first offseason. I think that's probably the biggest win that he's had this entire offseason.
And the biggest part of that too, the other unspoken part about it, I think he's relying on them a lot more. At least that's the sense I get.
Without question.
And he's riding them. I think that's good. You can see that in practice. He is truly, but he relies on them. He knows he can count on them, and that's a really important thing for a college football program.
I also think that he's done a really good job of like staffs do not stay together forever. Like inevitably, probably after this season, there'll be turnover of some sort, especially when you've got a bunch of younger coaches on the staff that have aspirations. But he's done a really good job of, there are certain, kind of key cogs in the staff, like Bob Frazier is not leaving, so there's always going to be that backbone established of his staff moving forward, which I think
Joe Susan, guys like that he trusts.
Exactly. Trust. Because even when Chris Ash brought in good coaches that he had relationships with, a lot of them were going to be at the door in a year or two to move on to the next best thing. I think, as you, Sarge, mentioned, they can pay these guys. I think that's the big thing.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's move on. I know we wanted to talk. It happened a couple weeks ago. But we wanted to talk about conference expansion because it still remains the biggest issue in college sports right now, and it's just a fascinating thing when you see Texas and Oklahoma, just pulling the plug on the Big 12, moving to the SEC. It's just I get it that the ripples haven't gotten up here yet, Kratch, but it's hard to imagine that it's not going to happen at some point. Where do you think this thing stands now? If you were looking at this, are we looking at an immediate, something's going to happen and shake loose in the coming weeks and months, or is this going to take years?
I think it's going to take years. I think in many ways, like the SEC pulled off the perfect surgical strike to which there's like no real like response or retaliation that's available, obvious to the other leagues. I mean, I think the big key is going to be, one, I think people will need to see what the next TV broadcast frontier looks like. I think that there's a lot of talk about streaming. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on, the Notre Dame season opener being on Peacock. I tend to think that the streaming aspect is going to be more tilted toward like one school than a whole conference worth of schools. I mean, obviously, if Amazon wants to bid for the Big Ten, suddenly Amazon has to find a way to broadcast, in a normal like mid-season week, 7 games in 7 Big Ten cities, and have 7 broadcast crews and 7 30-man, tech teams and everything. Whereas Notre Dame, I think Pete Thamel said on the Yahoo's podcast, which I know we all listen to, Notre Dame's like Ted Lasso. You put one truck in South Bend, and you've got 7 or 8 games a year, and that's like your season. That's what streaming packages want. I think that there's some thought that could the Big Ten kind of lease stuff out, but I think the Big Ten is in a good spot, but also kind of a potentially nerve-wracking spot.
Hey, Rutgers Rant listeners, it's Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media. We appreciate you supporting this podcast and the sponsors who help us continue doing it. This week's podcast is brought to you by the New Brunswick Development Corporation. If you listen to this show, you love Rutgers. And if you love Rutgers, you know the positive impact that DevCo has made on the campus and its community. We thank the New Brunswick Development Corporation for its continued support and for helping make this podcast possible. Now back to the show.
Because there's really no obvious way for them to go, but there's still a point, like the SEC is the strongest league in college football, but the Big Ten is still the second strongest league, and it's a big distance between them and the ACC, which is 3. Right. So I think they're in a position of strength, but also that can be a little bit worrisome that you can't go grab schools from the ACC because of their long-term contract. You don't necessarily have I think a big question is going to be, do the Big Ten presidents and chancellors and Kevin Warren have the intestinal fortitude to potentially destroy the ACC or the Pac-12?
And that is a big question mark. I don't know that Kevin Warren is the guy you want to have when you're going to war at this point. We haven't seen a lot from him as a leader quite just yet. Not saying he's new at the job still, relatively speaking, and inherited the crisis when he started. But Jim Delaney was the backroom operator that you wanted in situations like that. Sarge, what do you think the Big Ten should do, and what do you think the Big Ten will do?
I think they should. What you wrote about, I hate to give you credit, Poe, but go out west. Arizona State, USC. Go west and take those. I think the Pac-12, just raid them. But what will they do? I cannot see Kevin Warren being cutthroat enough to do it, nor the presidents. And I think Cratch is right. I think once they start looking at the money that's going to be available. I don't know if it's going to be as much as a lot of people think it's going to be. We are still dealing with, we will be dealing with the fallout of the COVID recession. Right. And I think when these schools, I just know from talking to people about it, that they're not going to want to divvy up the pie. How many ways can you divvy up the pie? I don't think they're going to want to divvy up any further. I think what the Big 12 is trying to form some sort of a coalition with the Pac-12. I thought that the Big 10 at worst should have done something like that, but I think what they should do is expand west. But I don't think that they'll be cutthroat enough to do it.
I'll be fascinated to monitor and watch over the. And I think you're right too, Kratz. It's going to be years, but I don't think we're done yet with the movement.
No, I think the Big Ten. If I'm the Big Ten, I just basically sit there and just hope and pray that Notre Dame decides, okay, like we're going to do this, but we're going to somehow finagle our way out of the ACC. Because if Notre Dame joined the Big Ten, like the Big Ten would be richer than God. I mean, like no pun intended. I mean, right. the amount of wealth that would flow their way. No, but I'm also curious too. Like I don't think the Big Ten would do it, but does a league like the Big 12, which is between a rock and a hard place at this point, do they zig when everyone else is zagging? Like everyone else is talking about adding members to make the pie bigger and everything. Do you just double down on having a regional league with games that people care about, and that maybe your thought process is we're not going to make as much TV money, but we're going to drastically reduce the cost of our Olympic sports in terms of travel and everything, and that's how we make up a little bit of difference. I think that could be, if you're going down, you might as well go down swinging and add all the Texas schools and create this gigantic Texas-centric conference and just wing it and see what happens.
Right. Well, I guess that's the question: is Ohio State going to be willing to say, yeah, let's stick to the regional thing? Is that going to be the next surgical strike? I mean, I have to be careful. I don't think it ever would happen. I really don't believe that the big, like all the rumors about, they're going to go after Ohio State, Michigan next. It's not. I can't possibly see it. But there's a reason why you be proactive. There's a reason why you have to.
The one thing that the Big Ten has going for is that these schools have been in the Big Ten for over a century. Texas has been in like 4 different conferences now. They don't care. There's no sense of unity or tradition. And I also think that the Big Ten research schools all being together is very important. That's, I think, a massive issue is the academics. The people on Twitter are like, the Big Ten needs to go add West Virginia. Like, come on, guys. Like, there's no way. They wouldn't even let West Virginia, join as an affiliate soccer team.
I love it. You're dumping on West Virginia. Matt Stammeier. Well, one of our finest journalists.
Not dumping on West Virginia.
Is a West Virginia grad. I'm going to tell him to listen because he's not.
I'm a South Carolina grad. Hey, I went there for student newspaper and Spurrier. It worked out.
He burns sofas regularly, Stammeier in West Orange after games. So I'm going to have to tell him this is good. I like it. I like a little rivalry here in the staff. All right. Can we move on to some Rutgers Insider questions? Let's do that next.
Sure.
As always, thanks for subscribing. I realize I've been giving you guys a bad link at the beginning of this. NJ.com /insider is not working right now. If you want to get in the action, we want people to sign up for subscriber exclusive, to subscribe to our website. There's an option when you do that to get the text messages for Rutgers, for the Giants, for the Yankees, and we ask every week people in our text message service what questions they have for the podcast, and those are the ones we use. So get involved in the conversations, and also you get our great content. So unfortunately, we got about 40 questions, and about 10 of them are on Cratch's beard. So I don't know, what, Sarge, we should do here. Do we want to talk about the beard anymore? I mean, they want to hear when did Cratch grow a beard, and what went into the decision-making process was the question. I mean, was it a strongest man competition, Cratch? Was it what,
it was as simple as this. It was summer, and I didn't feel like shaving, and then I got to a point, where I had gotten to this facial hair growth point where traditionally I just would give up and shave. And I just was like, hey, why don't I keep this going? And more importantly, I got approval from my fiance to keep it going.
Okay. All right.
And then and people were like, hey, it looks good. So, and then it got a little bushy, and I was like, we got to cut this back. And then the bigger thing too was my brother had his wedding a couple weekends ago. So I got to a point where I was like, I got to either commit to the beard or I got to shave now, because you don't want to make the decision 5 days before the wedding and then whack yourself shaving, or, some bad nick, some cut, some breakout or anything. So we're just sticking with the beard. So it's a day by day thing, But
the beard is day to day.
The beard is day to day, and I think I'm at least committing to, I don't want to say I'm going to the bye week at least, but
you're going to get to the opener. I'm
going to get to the opener. I feel like I've come this far.
Right.
I've got to bring it to the opener.
Right.
Hopefully Rod Carey won't recognize me with the beard, after all the things I've said about him.
That's awesome. Poor Rod Carey. All right. The next question. Any potential changes to seating capacity this fall to COVID issues? We have a bunch of that was the second most popular question after the beard. David Melman asked, what's going to happen with the Delta variant, with the number? Are they going to require vaccinated people? Sarge, what are you hearing on that front? Any news so far on that?
Yeah, nothing. Greg Schiano, I asked him just last week about it, and he kind of smirked, I think, when I said, I know this goes above your pay grade. I think he kind of got a kick out of me saying that. But I don't think that there's any answers right now. I think that the university, to their credit, is going to probably, take a wait and see approach. They don't need to make the decision in mid-August. I think they're going to have to make the decision as we get closer to September 2nd. But right now, I think they're just selling tickets. Again, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how many will the game be sold out? All the other things. I still don't know if just a general fan is going to want to come back in droves. So I don't think I think it's just an issue that they're going to let sort itself out. The bigger question probably is going to be what Jonathan Holloway told a podcast back in, I think it was probably Johnny and Dan's podcast, several months back where he left in doubt whether or not, the basketball games, whether the rack will have attendance. He said this way back in like February or March, I believe. I think as we get a little bit, closer, I think still the same thing that we've known all along, that indoor is going to be different than outdoor as far as, transmission of this virus. So, the indoor aspect might concern some Rutgers officials probably a little bit more than, being outdoors for a football game.
That's a great point.
Well, they've said that they're going to have full capacity at the rack with masks. I think that's what we're going to stick with. I'm just looking at the fact that stadiums around the country are still full, for baseball and everything. And I just think that is a big thing that's given Rutgers a lot of comfort that we have lots of examples of games and there not being issues. So I think right now we're probably looking at, no change in what they've announced. I tend to think that, Steve mentioned that vaccinated people only in the stadium. Rutgers has had a lot of opportunities to go that way, and they haven't. Yeah. So I tend to think they're not going to do that, but I think we're all on schedule. I think Sarge is right. Indoor season will be a little bit different, but I don't know. My guess is just that if you're Rutgers, you had a lot of controversy with the way you handled graduation or not having a graduation. You've got the students back on campus. If the students are back on campus, I feel like you've got to have the stadium at full capacity. And if the students are still on campus, you've got to have the rack at full capacity, even if it's with masks.
All right, next topic, and then it's the third most popular question. What are the odds Vedral stays healthy for 12 games? Doesn't that make the battle behind Vedral more crucial than we think? Peter in Palm City, thanks for the question. Another one along those lines, if Noah Vedral gets hurt and there's a real chance of that happening based on past history, how confident do you think the coaching staff is in his backups? As big as Art Sikowski struggled at times, having him as an experienced backup was a big luxury last year. Guys, it's funny. I was thinking about this you can think about regardless of how they feel about Snyder or Simon. I know they're confident in the guy building the offense for those two. And I think that makes a big difference, Sarge, right? I mean, like we saw what happened when they lost Vedral in the game against Purdue. They built an offense on the fly essentially to win that one. What do you think overall of those two questions?
Yeah, I just think that yes, it's a question mark, and I think that in mid-August, 6 days in the camp, I don't know if we've gotten those answers just yet, but. You just look at Sean Gleason, his history at Princeton, playing, 3-4 quarterbacks, not only during a season, but, in the course of a game, always having, faith in, in not only the starting quarterback, but, the backups behind him to execute the offense. And then, a year ago, like you said, the Purdue game is a great example of just basically having to piecemeal it on the fly, winning that game with, with Sikowski, Langen, down the stretch. I mean, it was a thing of beauty. I think I have confidence, at this point that Sean Gleason's going to be able to figure it out and try to, get the best out of that backup quarterback situation.
The other part of that, Kratz, is interesting. Like, it's not just, who the quarterback is. It's also when it happens. The trick of this is if Vedral does get hurt and all of a sudden, you're throwing Simon into the mix or Snyder in the mix for Wisconsin or, or one of these dominant Big Ten teams. I mean, that's part of the equation as well.
No doubt. I think, the one thing about Noah Vedral's playing style is conducive to him getting dinged up. I think we've established that. But the other thing is that while he missed time last year because of injury, he also plays hurt a lot. And that's also something that Rutgers can kind of not take comfort in, but know that he's not going to leave the field without really getting hurt.
Right.
But I think you're right. And here's the thing. There's really no soft spot in this schedule. No. Once you get past the Delaware game, it is all Big Ten all the time. So I think that's also makes it kind of difficult that you might, there's no place like, we'll ease through this period. Like, no. I mean, even with your bye week, your open date, you're going to Illinois, which is a place that you've struggled in. So yeah, there's really no good place, but I think Sarge is right. You have to have more faith in Gleason than the actual backup because we've never really seen the backup play.
Right. All All right, here's a good one. Chris from Toronto. Again, we are an international podcast, folks. In your opinion, what does the Rutgers football team need to improve to get over the hump and finish 6 or better in 2021? Is it more explosive plays at the special teams, more consistent, productive running game, putting more pressure on the quarterback, or something else? I'm going to say that for me, it's stopping the run. I think that's the biggest thing. That was a huge problem in games against a good competition, or even toss-up games like Nebraska last year. Sarge, what's your answer to that one?
Yeah, I mean, kind of almost a bigger picture of that is what we've said about Rutgers, all along. Until they actually look like a Big Ten program, and Big Ten is always going to be, an in the trenches league. And I'm talking about both sides of the ball. We certainly have a lot of question marks about the offensive line. Defensive line have a little bit less question marks. I think they'll be able to figure it out. But, those two areas, until they actually have the look, and feel of a Big Ten team on a week in, week out basis, that's going to be the thing that's going to get them, over the hump.
Kratch, you agree?
I agree. I also think chunk plays on offense, that's going to be a big key. I think that the way college football is played now, it's really hard to be a prolific offense if you're going, 80 yards and 10 plays every time. I think they need to have that, especially vertical passing game. I think Isaiah Washington, he's a big key because he's a bigger body wide receiver than Shameen and Bowen Crookshank. They need to kind of stretch Vedril's arm out a little bit, I think, and be able to hit that 35-yard bomb down the field, that 50-yard bomb down the field, get those 2-3 play scoring drives.
Here's another good one. Which players look like they've physically matured the most in the weight room since last year? Also, who is the breakout player this year? I'm going to throw one out there. I talked to Mike DeVerdoff, and I get that his transformation probably started last year, or based on compared to where he was physically when he came into Rutgers. But you talk to the kid now, you're like, oh my, all right, he has got a NFL type body now, which is really cool to see. If he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be an impact guy. Sarge, Kratch, which one do you want to take this? Who have been guys who have made the most progress in the weight room, and who you think is going to be the breakout player?
So the guy who Kratch wrote about today, Christian Izzy, impressed me just from a pure physical standpoint. Another guy, Isaiah Pacheco, looks like an NFL, running back from a physical standpoint. And as far as a breakout guy, I think, is Pacheco. Again, same guy. I think
you're high on him. I know.
I am really very high on him. I think he's going to be, a stud, this year. I really am. And when we talk about breakout, he still hasn't had a 1,000-yard season. He's been good. He's been certainly their best running back the last couple of years. But when we're talking about breakout, I think I think he's in line to have the 1,000-yard season if he stays healthy.
You have one, Kratch?
So I've always said this. I think the most impressive player physically on the field is Zakuto Iguanuku, the now came as a linebacker, now as a tight end, hasn't played, but I mean, he's just a physical freak. And I think as he learns the tight end position, he's a guy.
Is he going to play, you think?
I don't know if he's going to play. I think that he's probably the third tight end, maybe, third or fourth tight end, but he's just got so many physical tools. And obviously linebacker is so loaded, he probably wasn't going to see the field there. I think he's got a better chance to see the field at tight end. Breakout player, it's tough. I think Mayan Ahanatu could be the breakout player because I think so far what we've seen through camp, I think a guy like Aaron Lewis might be a year away still from making a really big impact on the defensive line. Ireland Burke is a guy who's kind of up or down, but there's a big opening there with Dwumfor leaving. Afeni Maisha, the Temple transfer, has been is still working back from some things. I think Mayan Ahanatu, a guy who has played real snaps at Minnesota, and now last year we played all 9 games at Rutgers. NFL pedigree. His dad was in the league for 12 years. He's known Greg Schiano since he was 14 years old when Schiano was volunteering at Berkeley Prep. I think he looks like he's grown a lot in the weight room. I think he could be a really strong, factor on the defensive line for Rutgers.
It's funny. There's one guy I'm thinking of for physical specimen who Sarge told me not to mention. That's great because Schiano's trying to hide him. So now I'm afraid I won't mention him. But there are a couple of guys in that roster who I looked like I was watching. Who is that? And you look at the roster, and you're like, oh wow, that kid is a freshman. So I'd be interested to see if some of those guys, and if it happens, I'll come back on the podcast and say that we were right. Right, Sarge? Is that allowed at least?
Yeah, probably. Once the season
starts.
Yeah, we could probably say it right after week 1.
After the Heisman Trophy presentation.
You just want to be able to say, I knew that guy was going to be. All right. Let's see if we have anything else. I think that covers just about all of. All right, this one last general one. Oh, no, this is a fun one. Let's do this one. What new trick play do you want to see in 2021? Coach Gleason is all ears. CJ and Basking Ridge. Is there something you want to see from without giving away anything? I don't think they've really done a lot of trick plays at this point, but without giving anything away, is there something you guys would like to see from this, some chicanery from this team?
I would like to see 2 plays. One, I just would like to see the old Steve Spurrier double pass. Vedral kind of throws the backwards pass to Melton probably, and then chucks it downfield. I'd love to see Rutgers put the wedge in, like the old school, 1920s, 30s wedge. Where you go 5 wide, you spread everything out, you got only your 5 offensive linemen in, and then literally those guys just form a V, ear hole to what hole, and then just Vedral gets in behind the center, and you just push. The goal is to introduce the nose guard to the back safety. That's the goal. Boom. I'd love to see just create a massive pile of humanity and just push the line forward.
Leather helmet, Sarge. How about that?
Yeah, I want to see the Fumblerooski. I mean,
really?
Let a guy like Nick Crimmin, who's been here for 6 years, loyal guy, he's changed positions, done everything that they asked, and let him execute the Fumblerooski.
That'd be something else. I like it. Let's see if Sean Gleason adopts these plays. We will know that he is one of our loyal listeners. All right. Thanks again for your questions, everyone. Much appreciated. Anything else we want to cover? Oh, I do want to mention hoops recruiting. A couple of players for 2022, Derek Simpson for Lenape guard, Nashville forward Braden Moore, a couple of guys again who might not be on the big recruiting services radar, but Brian Pacheco does a great job with this. He mentioned that Arizona State had just offered Simpson, which it kind of tells me that, if that's going to happen, that Bobby Hurley's network of New Jersey people, someone got to him and said, hey, this kid's a player. You got to try to get him before he gets on the radar. That's how I think that probably went down, knowing his connections up here. Kratch, you got anything you got anything else about recruiting or anything else?
No, I don't think we talked about, did we talk about Nick Sirianni transferring? We didn't.
No, we did
not. Yeah, so Nick Sirianni obviously is in the transfer portal weekly. He's posting up Instagram. If you haven't seen it, the Globe. We're getting closer. We zoomed in on him in Arizona, mountaintop. Just look. I think it was a long time coming. Obviously, it's something I think Rutgers kind of expected for a while. So we'll see where he lands up. He's got 1 year of eligibility left. I think Arizona State's a place where a lot of people have said, but I don't think it's a given. I think Ohio State is there. So either way, my gut just tells me he's going to land somewhere in the Big Ten, and then we are going to potentially have a Sirianni Rivera match at some point, although I think there's a very good shot that Nick goes down to 125 to try to chase Spencer Lee for his final year.
You watched the Olympics wrestling. Would he have won gold?
It's so tough. I mean, look, I think the thing is, people have always said that Nick is defensively, he is up there with the best in the world. I think the big question on Nick has always been his offense. He showed a lot of it. He was wrestling in those overseas tournaments before. Obviously, he was able to compete at the trials because of COVID, but I think it would have been close. I mean, Thomas Gilman won bronze for the U.S. Nick beat it at the tournament. I think it was the Glen in France. He beat the guy who beat Gilman that weekend. So I think he certainly would have had a shot.
Interesting. All right. Sarge, anything else? Final thoughts?
No, I mean, I just kind of think, you being at football practice was something that we probably should have touched on more, because it was first time, I think, in like 4 or 5 years. I mean, did you need the GPS to kind of get to Pacheco?
You start to learn things about yourself after doing something for 25 years. I don't necessarily get a lot out of watching football practice. I can be honest for you guys. Although I will say I did get a fair amount on this one. So maybe I think in 4 or 5 years from now, I think there's a good chance you're going to see me back there. I really do.
With a bucket hat, though, I mean, because that's gonna be, a beard and a bucket hat.
I can't do the beard, unfortunately, and I'm not the bucket hat. Come on.
4 or 5 years from now, the Death Star might be operational at that point.
That's true. I can get a tour. I can stop in, get a tour of the Death Star, the new football facility, and go out and watch the Rose Bowl defending champions out there at the football practice. That'd be perfect. All right. On that note, Rose Bowl defending champions, let's sign off for the week. Thanks to Devco. Thanks to all our listeners. We appreciate it. And we will check back in with you before the season. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Rutgers Rant. To participate in the conversation and receive live updates about the Scarlet Knights directly to your phone, sign up at NJ.com/insider.
You haven't heard enough from me yet, huh? Steve Politi here for one last thank you to this episode's sponsor, New Brunswick Development Corporation, and to listeners like you who make it all the way to the end of the show. We'll see you again soon.